My name is Elena Ivanovna. I'm 46 years old, born and raised in Moscow. For over 20 years, I worked within one of the many branches connected to the Kremlin. My official title was mid-level intelligence coordinator, but in truth, most of what I did was classified. I never spoke about it to my family, not to my teenage son, not to my elderly mother, and definitely not to my friends. What few I had. My life was quiet on the outside, but heavy inside, the kind of heaviness that you carry in your chest every day and just learn to ignore. My daily routine was always the same. I woke up early, made tea for my mother, prepared breakfast for my son, and caught the metro by 7:15 a.m. I wore the same long gray coat every winter, boots with worn heels, and gloves with a hole in the thumb. You might think people working for the government live luxuriously. Not always, especially if you keep your head down and just do what you're told. To be honest, I never truly believed in God. I was baptized as a baby. Everyone was, but faith was more tradition than truth for me. I lit candles on holidays. I crossed myself out of habit. But in my heart, I believed in systems, not salvation. I trusted in protocol, in the party, in authority. There was no room for miracles in my world, until everything changed. It happened on a Tuesday morning in February. The air was bitter cold, -15 degrees, and my mother had been coughing all night. I barely slept. I was tired late, and my nerves were frayed. I argued with my son about his phone. I skipped breakfast. I left home in a rush, clutching my briefcase and thermos, and hurried toward the metro station, barely aware of my surroundings. I remember stepping into the train. It was crowded. People looked exhausted, staring at their phones or the floor. I found a spot to stand near the doors and held on to the metal pole. That's when I felt it, a sharp, sudden pressure in the center of my chest. I thought maybe it was heartburn or stress. I tried to breathe deeply, but the pain intensified. It spread down my left arm. My fingers went cold. My vision blurred. Then, nothing. They told me later I collapsed just before the train reached the next station. A passenger called for help. A stranger tried CPR. My heart had stopped completely. Technically, I was dead for over 8 minutes. 8 long minutes. But during those 8 minutes, I was somewhere else. Not unconscious. Not dreaming. I saw things I never thought possible. Things that no training or briefing could prepare me for. What I experienced shattered my understanding of reality and eternity. And now I feel I have no choice but to tell the truth. Because it wasn't just about me. The moment my heart stopped, something impossible happened. It was like 1 second I was collapsing in the metro, and the next I was outside my body. I mean that literally. I could see myself lying on the floor of the train, motionless. My briefcase had fallen open beside me. Papers scattered everywhere. People were panicking. A young man in a leather jacket bent over me, pressing on my chest, shouting something I couldn't quite hear. Another woman was crying, but I felt nothing. No pain, no fear, just an overwhelming sense of stillness. At first I thought I must be dreaming, but it wasn't like a dream. Everything was too real, too detailed. I could see the advertisement posters on the wall, the dirt on the train floor, the look in the paramedic's eyes when he arrived. But I was floating above it all, like a silent observer. Then I started to rise. I didn't move on my own. It was as if I was being gently pulled upward, through the roof of the train, through layers of concrete, through the very fabric of the world. The further I went, the less the city mattered. Moscow disappeared below me like smoke. My name, my job, my identity, all of it began to fade. But strangely, I didn't care. I felt completely safe, surrounded by something I can only describe as warmth, not physical, but emotional, like being wrapped in light. After a while, I found myself in darkness, not an evil or scary darkness. It was peaceful, deep, quiet, like floating in the middle of a vast ocean under a night sky. Then, far ahead, I saw something, like a soft golden glow. It pulsed gently, drawing me in. I didn't walk, I didn't fly. I just moved closer, as if my soul was being drawn home. The light grew brighter, warmer. It wasn't harsh like the sun, it was alive. And as I came nearer, I began to hear music, not like anything I'd ever heard before. It wasn't made of instruments or voices, but it had harmony. It felt like the entire universe was singing a lullaby. Every note touched something deep in me. I began to weep, not with sadness, but with overwhelming beauty. Then something even more unexpected happened. I felt a presence, strong, loving, vast. It was as if someone had always been with me, even when I didn't know it. I turned toward the presence, and that's when I saw him, Jesus, but not the Jesus I had seen in paintings or icons. He wasn't pale, he wasn't glowing, he looked real, like a man you could meet on the street, but radiant from the inside. His eyes were like galaxies, endless, ancient, full of compassion. He didn't speak at first, he just looked at me and smiled, like he had been waiting a long, long time, and in that moment, I felt completely known and completely loved. I stood in front of him, unable to speak. not because I was afraid, but because everything inside me was overwhelmed. He looked nothing like the images I had grown up with. There was no golden halo, no white robe with a red sash. He looked like a man of the Middle East, strong, weathered, but radiating something beyond human. His presence was more than visual, it filled every part of me. When I looked into his eyes, I felt like he saw every moment of my life, every lie I told, every truth I hid, every fear I buried, and still, he loved me. "Elena," he said, in a voice that was both thunder and whisper, "you are not alone. You never were." His words went straight through me, not just into my mind, but deep into my soul. I wanted to fall to my knees, but I couldn't move. He stepped closer and gently touched my shoulder. At that moment, the space around us changed completely. Suddenly, we were standing in a vast hall made of what looked like glass and light. It had no ceiling, no floor, only layers of shimmering air. Time didn't exist there. There was no clock, no sense of waiting. Everything felt eternal. In front of us, a figure appeared, a woman, dressed in a dark blue government suit with medals on her chest. Her expression was cold, stern, proud, but I recognized her instantly. She had been a high-ranking Kremlin official, someone I had only seen in passing, but whose name carried weight in every hallway I had worked in. News had spread recently that she had died. Official reports said it was a stroke. Now she stood there completely exposed, no guards, no power, just her and the truth. Jesus looked at her with deep, sorrowful eyes. "You served authority," he said gently, "but you forgot the authority above all." The woman didn't speak. Her face began to tremble, and then Jesus asked her the first question. "Did you love the truth more than your comfort?" The silence was unbearable. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She lowered her head and tears began to fall. Not just tears of guilt, but of awakening, like she finally understood what she had wasted. Jesus stepped closer. "Did you use your influence to set others free, or to keep them afraid?" At that moment, she collapsed to her knees. Her whole body shook as if the weight of every decision she'd made had returned to crush her. There was no punishment in his voice, only truth, pure, cutting, eternal truth. And then came the third question. "When I whispered to your heart, did you listen?" She sobbed. Jesus turned to me. "Elena," he said, "these are the same questions Vladimir will one day face. Every soul, no matter how powerful, must answer before me." I stood frozen, my heart pounding. What I saw next shook me even more. After the woman faded into light, the space around us shifted again. The great hall disappeared, and I suddenly found myself standing in what looked like a battlefield. But it wasn't a physical war. There were no guns, no tanks. Instead, I saw people, millions of them, walking with blindfolds on, stumbling over each other, falling into pits they couldn't see. They were silent, completely unaware of the danger around them. And above them stood towers of smoke, like clouds hiding the sky. "What is this?" I whispered. Jesus stood beside me, watching with eyes full of grief. "This is the blindness caused by lies," he said. "When leaders choose fear over truth, this is what they build, generations of spiritual blindness." Then I saw a man standing high above the crowd. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I knew who it was. His silhouette, his posture, even the weight of his presence, it was unmistakable. It was Vladimir Putin. But he wasn't shouting or giving orders. He was completely still, staring at a mirror. The mirror didn't show his physical appearance, it showed his soul. And in that mirror I saw something horrifying. A boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, crying behind a closed door. A child forgotten, abandoned, terrified. "Why am I seeing this?" I asked. Jesus replied, "Because even the powerful began as the powerless. The questions I ask are not just for punishment. They are for healing. If he remembers the pain he buried, he may choose differently." Suddenly the vision changed again. Now I stood before 3 great doors, each marked with a single word in a language I didn't recognize, but somehow understood. The first door said, "Mercy." The second, "Justice." The third, "Silence." I asked Jesus what they meant. "These are the doors every leader will face at the end of their days," he said. "If they chose mercy in life, they will walk through mercy and death. If they ruled with justice, justice will stand with them. But if they chose silence when they should have spoken truth, then silence will be their judge." The weight of those words was unbearable. I wanted to turn away, but I couldn't. Then Jesus showed me one final scene. I saw a red square, empty, completely silent. The Kremlin walls were crumbling, not from bombs or weapons, but from within. The bricks turned to dust and blew away in the wind. On the ground I saw a book, half buried. I reached down to touch it, and the cover read, "Truth." Jesus looked at me with a deep sadness and said, "When truth is buried for too long, it will rise again, but not gently." I trembled. Everything I thought I understood about power, loyalty, and obedience felt like dust in my hands. I wasn't just being shown these things, I was being told to remember them, to speak of them, to warn others, because the judgment is real, and it is coming. After the visions faded, I found myself once again standing before Jesus. The light around him was brighter now, almost too bright to look at, but his presence calmed me. I had so many questions about the future, about Russia, about my life, about what I was supposed to do with everything I had just seen. But before I could ask, he spoke first. "Elena," he said, "you were brought here not because you are righteous, but because you are willing." I didn't understand at first. My voice trembled as I finally managed to speak. "Why me?" I asked. "Why would you show me these things?" He smiled, not with amusement, but with deep love, like a parent who sees a child finally beginning to understand. "Because you know what it means to obey blindly. You've lived in fear, and now you must live in truth. What I showed you was not for your curiosity. It is for your responsibility." Then he reached out his hand and touched the center of my chest. Immediately, I felt a surge of warmth, so intense I thought I would melt into the light itself. It wasn't pain, it was power, love, infinite and alive. It entered every broken part of me, every scar, every lie I had ever believed about myself. All of it was touched and made whole. And then he spoke his final message. "Tell them I am real. Tell them I am coming, not to destroy, but to restore. Let no one say, I did not know. Let no one say, no one warned me. And above all, tell them I still love them, even now." Tears poured down my face. Not out of fear, but out of overwhelming love. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay in that presence forever. But he looked into my eyes, and I knew it was time. "You must return," he said gently. "There is work to do. Speak the truth, even when it costs you. Forgive, even when they don't deserve it. Love, even when it hurts." Then the light began to dim, and the warmth started to fade. "No, please," I whispered. "Let me stay." But I was already falling fast, through darkness, through silence, then pain. I opened my eyes to blinding hospital lights. Machines beeped all around me. A nurse shouted something in Russian. My mother was screaming. My son was sobbing. A doctor dropped his clipboard and just stared at me. They said it was impossible. They had declared me clinically dead. No heartbeat for 8 minutes. No brain activity. The doctor shook his head and said, "There is no medical explanation for this." But I knew the truth. I had met the one who holds all life, and I had been sent back with a message. After I returned from that experience, everything changed. At first I couldn't speak, not because I was physically weak, but because I had no words for what I had seen. The doctors ran endless tests. They called my recovery a miracle in private, but anomaly in their official reports. My mother thought I had lost my mind. My son kept hugging me like he was afraid I'd vanish again. But I knew I hadn't lost anything. In fact, I had found everything. The first weeks after the hospital were the hardest. How do you return to a normal life after seeing eternity? I couldn't go back to my old job. I resigned. I gave up the clearances, the silence, the secrets. I started reading the Gospels, not as literature, not as myth, but as truth. And for the first time in my life, I prayed. Not like a child repeating memorized words, but like a soul speaking directly to the Creator. I asked for forgiveness. For the lies I protected, for the fear I obeyed, for the silence I chose when I should have spoken. And slowly, I changed. I started helping others, quietly at first, volunteering, listening, speaking truth when I could, not preaching, just sharing, telling my story to anyone who had ears to hear. Some laughed, some dismissed me, some got angry, but just a few cried, and I knew they felt what I had felt. Now I'm telling this to you, not because I want attention, not because I want to be believed, but because someone needs to hear this. You, whoever you are, wherever you are, I'm telling you, Jesus is real. Eternity is real. And your soul, it matters more than anything in this world. I used to think power was everything. Obedience, loyalty, control. But on the other side, none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered were the questions he asked. Did you love the truth more than your comfort? Did you use your influence to set others free, or to keep them afraid? When he whispered to your heart, did you listen? These aren't just questions for presidents or officials. They're for all of us. For me, for you, for every single soul. If you've heard his whisper, don't ignore it. If you've felt him tug at your heart, don't wait. You don't need to die to meet him. He's closer than you think. Talk to him, not with fancy words, just honestly, from your heart. Tell him your fears, your pain, your doubts. He already knows. He's just waiting for you to turn. That's all I did. And he met me, in death, and gave me back my life, not just my breath, but my purpose. So now I'm passing that on to you. Don't be afraid, but be ready, because one day we'll all stand before him, and he will ask the same 3 questions.